1. I used to work at a store that sold, but also bought and repaired arcade machines. I was one of the technicians that was supposed to repair them, but other employees shared that duty with me. One of the other employees asks me to help him check all the power supply voltages on this skee-ball clone machine. I have my multimeter ready to go, so I ask him if he has a manual or schematic around. Not surprisingly, he doesn't, but it doesn't hurt to ask. I look over the wiring, starting from the power inlet, and notice there's something with 2 terminals not connected to anything. But the shorter black wire from the inlet is twisted and taped onto another black wire. A switch broke, maybe. I look on the other side and notice there's an empty space that says 250 volts, 3 amps. Oh, it's a fuse holder. I figure the guy wants to see if I'll catch it as some kind of test set up by the boss, maybe. So I nonchalantly point out that I see the problem right there. There's no fuse, someone wired around it. He said he did that because he couldn't find a fuse that would fit. I ask him where we keep fuse holders, and he of course has no idea where any fuse holders are. Still using my voice flat and calm, I ask if he has seen another machine that has the same kind of fuse that we could use just for testing. No idea, of course. I tell him don't plug it in yet. We need a fuse holder and a 3-amp fuse. He walks with the cord over to the power strip, and I pull the other end out the back. It's an IEC connector. And I tell him that bypassing a fuse is a good way to start a fire. And the store burning down would put us all out of a job. I also explain that if it were done to a customer's game and it caught fire in their building, that the store could get sued. My voice was still flat and calm at this point, yet he snaps at me to calm down. I tell him if he's going to ever bypass a fuse that he'd better have a fire extinguisher handy, as well as a good pair of running shoes. I tell him I still need to check some other things with the wiring before we plug it in, and I ask him to go get some duct tape, which I didn't need, but I wanted to keep him busy while I searched for a fuse holder before he plugged it in. But he wouldn't move. I couldn't take the power cord with me because he was holding it, and there was no fuse to pull out to prevent him from powering it. If I were to reach in and try disconnecting the hot wire, I couldn't trust him to know better than to plug it in while I'm touching it, being how incompetent he had just proven himself to be. I set the female end on the cord down and step away, hoping I've made my point enough. But no, he goes for the power inlet. I yell stop, and he doesn't even flinch. I figure that instead of having any further conversation with him or trying to play keep away with the cord, I run full sprint to the fire extinguisher as though the game was already on fire, grab it and run back and point the hose into the machine, ready to spray at the first sign of smoke. Of course, by now he's plugged it in. Somehow, by blind luck, it doesn't catch fire. Of course, it doesn't work either, probably because he or the other idiot has fixed other things. I know there would have been an actual fault downstream for a fire to start from a bypass fuse. But given that the guy was dumb enough to bypass a fuse, the odds of him having caused a short with his repairs seemed pretty high at that time. Due to misplaced sympathy I had for job seekers, I hated the idea of reporting anything that could cost another person their job, being that it had been hard enough for me to get a job in an electronics field when I didn't have a bad reputation with a previous employer. On the other hand, I didn't want the boss himself to accidentally start a fire by trying to fix the machine, but then plugging it in without noticing the bypassed fuse. So I sent my boss a text saying the previous owner bypassed the fuse, so it shouldn't be plugged in until that issue is addressed. That skee-ball clone landed squarely in the not my problem category, until and unless the fuse problem was addressed. As far as I know, the machine never got fixed. About 4 weeks afterwards, I ended up getting dismissed, not that it mattered, because the store ended up going out of business about 2 months later. I never saw any news about a customer or his and her family filing a lawsuit against the store, though, about a fire or electrocution caused by a game sold or fixed by the store. Believe me, I would totally expose a still open business that was still dangerously bad at their job. Side note, there was kind of a theme around this place, where no matter how often someone used a tool, supply, or part, there was never anyone who knew where it was. Some people would actually get mad at me if I told them where I left a shared tool, or asked them beforehand where I should leave it so they could find it themselves. There were entire arcade machines that the store effectively lost in their own warehouse because the machine was buried behind boxes and other machines, out of sight for so long that it was forgotten. There was no paper or electronic record of what we had. 2. I worked as a tech support and customer care for a large telecommunication company in my country. The company I worked for was actually one of these centers that got the project as a form of outsourcing. I had my fair share of weird encounters of any kind. Karens, Kevins, you name it. But the best story is still one I happened to listen in while my colleague was dealing with it. The project was just established and we were the first on it. This is how it went down. I was sitting at my place and everything was quiet. There were only 5 or so other people at work since it was the late shift. Colleague takes a call and I half-hearted listen in, but my attention rose when she dropped the question. So he hammered the cable into the box. She then excused herself politely, telling the customer she's gonna check with the back office, since she wasn't sure if the approach was the proper one in that special situation. She put him on hold and started to bang her head on the table, with a wailing noise of despair, laughter, and disbelief. Did you just say she hammered the cable into the connection box in the wall? Yes, listen to this. So this guy called because the whole connection of his mom's contract doesn't work? And then he started to explain how his mom angrily took a hammer and hammered one side of the plug into the connection plug on the wall because it didn't fit. I start to wail too. So that means it was the wrong port, and instead of going to the other one, logical reaction, she decided to ram that thing in. And that's not all too. When it obviously didn't work, she smashed the router against the wall when it didn't work, and she had no internet connection, like full force through it. And now he asks if we can deliver a substitute. I wail harder. He's so nice, and it's really awkward for him. I really want to help him out, so you're more into this stuff. You kind of remember more from the training, right? Yeah, no chance we deliver that. She willingly destroyed the connection port, so we're gonna need to send someone to repair this. No way to cover this up and pretend nothing happened. As for the box, she has to pay it and... What are you doing here, chatting? Dude, listen to this, she tells the story again. We were all in the same project and training, so we're more like friends. He was pretty chill too. His eyes go wider, and he starts wailing. So, it's a case of intentional damage, and she's gotta pay for it. If she's lucky, she has a property insurance that is willing to cover the costs. Feel bad for this guy, calling in with a case of aggressive dumb mother. Anyway, we can change the router if it fell off somewhere. You gonna ask him if it fell from a high place? Make it suggestive. If he picks it up, do it. If not, well, you tried within your boundaries. So I'm gonna ask him if it fell from a shelf or something. We both at the same time say yes. Supervisor sits down and listens in too. Hello, I'm sorry for the long wait. We discussed the best course of action now. So, just to reminiscent, could it be possible the router just fell from a really high place? We sit there in silence, waiting anxiously. No, I mean if it fell down from a really high place like a shelf. It's an accident, and we can change the router for free. In a continued silence, we try not to laugh. Are you sure it didn't fall off a shelf or something when she tried to move her interior around and just forgot about the modem? In further silence, we try not to head desk. Well, is that so? That's unfortunate. Well, since it's a case of intentional damage, and the call ends. So he didn't pick it up? Nope, he said, no, I'm sure she smashed it against the wall. Well, if you went any more suggestive, I would have felt assaulted by the suggestions. Holy cow, 2 people being that dense. One has aggression issues and her son is denser than a black hole. 3. I was leading a major upgrade of the main software we use for our property and rating system in the local government. It was a very welcome upgrade and also a very large one. The old system was written on old VB6 and looked it too. It was very dated. The new version of the software was much prettier, way easier to use, more powerful and based on .NET technology. The upgrade was mapped out, and we thought it would take around 18 months to complete. This allowed plenty of time for the upgrade to occur into training and beta environments, which allowed for much testing and training for the users. It also allowed us to build the system by creating structure and workflows, etc. Before my time, it appears many of the upgrades were a bit ad hoc. The idea of change management via ITIL was very foreign and considered too much work for some. As part of the testing, too much consternation for some staff, they were asked to document major components of their job and put it into a checklist. It was suggested that they flesh out most of the checklist quickly, but then, as they do their job, add additional things to the checklist. If they only did some things once a month, quarterly, fiscal year, then it won't be missed and we could ensure we have it working. There was some resistance, as some thought it was a way of checking up on their job, but we needed to know if the software worked. We informed them that we required all the users to sign off on their checklists, and when everyone had signed off, we knew we were ready to go live with the upgrade. It was also intimated that if people were lazy with their checklists, then we might lower the priority of assisting them after the upgrade. Example, if 10 people had problems and one of them didn't bother testing it, then I'd assist the other 9 first. This was agreed to by the directors. It was explained to the staff that while we were happy that everything on the checklist were completed, we expected some minor things to still not work on the day of go live, as it would not be possible to automate the upgrade, and we were relying on several squishy humans to do much of the work. Myself particularly. We had vendor consultants assisting, whom I expected to be slightly better than I. Please be patient come Monday morning if you find some minor things not working. Well, we performed the upgrade over a weekend and arrived early Monday morning in anticipation for the smooth transition. Several staff arrived early to log in and test, and we started getting a trickle of items not properly implemented. Most were easy to fix, example, a typo here and there. At about 10 a.m., a user comes in and informs me she can't log into the software. Think of your favorite user, how wonderful they are to assist. This wasn't that person. So I wandered down to her desk to have a look. Perhaps the software didn't install correctly. Perhaps something else didn't work. It was all installed correctly, so I wandered back to my office and checked her user permissions. One of the things this upgrade changed was the user permissions. It went granular, comparatively. It went subatomic. It also went AD authentication, LDAP or something. It was a while ago now. Her username was spelled incorrectly. I thought it was odd, as this was one of the processes we were able to automate. Select from permissions and chuck it here. So I log into the test system. Same spelling error. Same in the beta environment too. I then pulled out the checklist and saw her ticks and her signature on the bottom. For 18 months we were testing the software and verifying that it was all working, and she hadn't even logged in. When pressed about why not, she said it was several months before she attempted to get into the system for the first time, and by then she knew it was going to look bad, so she just made it all up, hoping that it would go unnoticed. I reminded her and her boss that I was going to give priority to those that actually tried and tested their job, and as such, she would go to the bottom of the list. Almost 2 weeks later, my boss poked his head into my office, and only his head, sort of leaning around the door. "All right, you made your point. Now set her up." She was unable to do anything other than simple filing or sorting until then. 4. I just finished up for the day when a director from one of our clients calls my mobile directly. This isn't unusual during business hours, however. I was meeting with her the next day, so I figured she may have been calling to reschedule. I checked the time. It's about an hour after our business hours, so I figured, screw it, I'll answer. They pay a lot, so it should be important. "Hi, how are you? What can I help you with?"
"I've just arrived at home, opened that laptop you organized for me, and it's come up with a message saying OneDrive needs to sign in. I thought you guys would have already sorted all this out. This is what we pay you for. Can you get this fixed? I don't have time to deal with issues like this. Hello? Are you there?"
Okay. I'm happy to help.
"Yes, it's urgent. I need this fixed now."
Okay, well, what's on the screen right now? I just need to see if I can access your device.
"I don't have time for this. Can you just jump in and fix this?"
Yes, I'm logging into your remote support system.
"Righto."
There's awkward silence whilst I log in into MFA.
Hello? Are you still there? Hello?
Yes, sorry, I'm still here. I'm having trouble connecting to your machine as it appears to be offline.
It's not offline. I'm connected to the Wi-Fi. There's a globe icon in the taskbar, which I know means I'm connected.
Okay, the globe icon usually means that you are not connected. We just need to...
Again, I don't have time for this. It should just be set up already. Hello?
Let me just try something. Just open Chrome and go to your YouTube or Facebook.
Fine, give me a second.
Click, click, click. Tap, tap, tap.
It says there's no internet connection in Chrome.
Okay, that would be why I can't connect remotely. Let's just reset your Wi-Fi connection. Right-click on the globe, right-click on your network. I talk her through reconnecting to her home network. Whilst we're doing that, I could hear her click frantically and the machine freezes.
Now the computer's frozen. This shouldn't happen. This is ridiculous.
Okay, let's just power cycle the laptop, and I talked her through doing that. One reboot later.
It started again, and wanting me to log in. Do I log in?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's taking forever.
It isn't, I'm watching it now, and after a few seconds it logs in, and OneDrive starts syncing.
It's working now. What did you do?
All we've done so far is connect your laptop to the internet.
It was connected before. Your guys didn't set up my laptop properly. This is what happens when things are missed.
It's an automatic process for all your business computers. You log in, and if OneDrive can talk to the internet, it will automatically log in.
It's working now. Just remember, this can't happen again. We pay good money to make sure things like this don't happen. We can talk about this further tomorrow.
No problem. I'm happy that I could fit... She hung up. I still had our RMM window open. Sat there bewildered for a moment and watched her open Chrome, type in Netflix, and start watching a movie. Fucking MSP life. 5. About 7 or 8 years back, I was working as the entire IT department for a small chain of medical clinics in the Pacific Northwest, US. This chain of clinics was a boutique service where they catered to wealthy patients, and were trying to add new cosmetic services in addition to the regular care offered. To that end, they got themselves a fancy new laser-assisted liposuction machine. This machine had a laser attachment to the tip that would melt fatty tissue without interacting with surrounding muscle, veins, or connective tissue. It meant they could feed a much smaller tube into the incision and suck the liquefied fat out while doing significantly less damage to the non-fatty tissue, resulting in less bruising and way faster recovery. Very cool. Now, this particular machine was made by Palomar, and the surgical tips with the laser emitter were proprietary to Palomar, and had an RFID chip embedded in each one with an ID number. Before the machine would activate, you had to scan the RFID chip, and once the machine verified that you had a valid tip, it would activate for a few hours and allow you to perform the surgery, then deactivate that serial number so no one could reuse the same tip in 2 surgeries. And to validate the part was a genuine tip from Palomar and not some knockoff part. Now, just before they were going to do their first live procedure, Palomar sent a firmware update to the liposuction machine. And by sent, I mean they literally mailed an old-school clunky compact flash card with the update on it. It was at this point that I became involved in this circus. The CEO called me and told me I needed to install the firmware update on the new liposuction machine before its inaugural surgery. Now, like most IT guys for smaller operations, I am a generalist by necessity. I've done everything from physical infrastructure to migrating physical servers to virtual machines to user-level support, to running project management on developing their in-house electronic medical record system, building business analytics with SSRS. But laser-assisted liposuction machines is way outside of my wheelhouse. I explained to the CEO that there is in fact a very specialized breed of nerd you use to service and maintain computerized surgical equipment. And those nerds make significantly more money than my variety does, to reflect the very specialized training they have received. It's designed so doctors can figure it out, you should be fine. So I shrugged, took the clunky memory card, and went to find the flesh-melting laser. True to his word, it was not a complicated procedure. Big clunky card slot is in the back of the machine. fit the big clunky card, I plug the card in, plug the machine in, turn it on. On powering up, the machine booted from the memory card and loaded the firmware update automatically. I watched the various load messages, no obvious errors pop up. It finishes its install and instructs me to pull the card out and restart. I follow direction, and lo and behold, the machine boots up to a fancy full-color menu. Hooray, that went pretty easy, I thought. But this was not my first rodeo, and while I don't know anything about laser-assisted liposuction machines, I do know not to trust a patch in a production environment without some testing first. So I go to the doctor who's supposed to be performing surgery with this thing in a few days, and I said to her, "Hey doc, I've got that update loaded in the Palomar machine. It looks like it went fine, but I don't really know what fine looks like on there. So you should definitely turn it on, activate a tip, and make sure the laser is working, that it's sucking, and doing all the things that it's supposed to do before you actually try to use it." She assured me that she would, and I left and went on with my life, blissfully unaware that she'd lied. A few days later, I'm having a regular boring day when I get a panicked call from my CEO that I'm needed in the new operating room right now. My heart sank, and I knew I wanted no part of what was about to transpire. "What's going on?" I asked.
"There's something wrong with the liposuction machine, and we need you to take a look at it."
"I am not remotely qualified to troubleshoot a laser liposuction machine," I replied. "I have no idea where to even begin."
"You're all we've got, so get in there and try."
Dutifully I went. When I arrived, there was a naked woman laying on the operating table. She had a sterile drape over her for modesty, and hovering over her with the Palomar machine was the doctor and her nurse in full surgical gowns, masks, gloves, the works. I, on the other hand, had no earthly business in that room in my business casual attire and beard. Now, the naked woman had already been prepped for surgery. That doesn't just mean she was naked and sterilized, oh no. When you go in for liposuction, they prepare you by injecting large amounts of saline mixed with lidocaine into all the tissues they intend to remove. The lidocaine numbs the tissue, and saline is injected to bloat things up, loosen the tissue, and create room and pressure for the vacuum hose and surgical tip. Even if they do nothing more than prep you, you're going to be numb, bruised, and spend days recovering. So it's not a small thing. Once you've prepped the patient, you're pretty committed to doing the surgery. Trying to sound like this was the most normal thing I'd done all day, I asked the doctor, "What's going on?"
"The tips won't activate. I waver over the sensor here and it just does nothing."
"All right," I answer, and walk over to the table to look at the machine. "Looks pretty normal to me. She's deeper into the menus than I'd ever gone when I'd update, but there's no warnings, no errors, the fans are humming, everything looks like it should be working, as near as I can see." I reboot the machine and ask her to try again. I have no idea how to get to the part where it activates the tips. She navigates the menu to begin the surgery and waves the tip over the sensor. Nothing. "Have you tried another surgical tip? Maybe that one is faulty," I say.
"I really don't want to do that," she says. "We'll have to discard them both when this is over if I do."
"I think we're kind of at the point where you need to try it," I reply. So she gets another tip and waves it over the sensor, still nothing. I shut the machine down, plug in the firmware card again, and reload the new firmware. Once again it loads smoothly as near as I can tell, and after it boots up again, it looks normal. So I ask her to try again with both the tips, no dice. I'm officially at the end of my generic troubleshooting 101 quiver at this point. So I call the 800 number on the machine. I get a Palomar tech support rep on the phone and explain what's going on. He asks me to reboot the machine to reload the firmware and report any errors that come up during the load. He asks me to try swapping out the tips. I dutifully repeat the troubleshooting steps with him because I understand users lie and you can't trust them even if they tell you they tried it. We get through the obvious stuff while the poor naked lady is still miserably laying bloated and numb on the table next to me, and I'm doing my best to pretend she's a potted plant that should not be looked at directly. Finally, the Palomar rep says,
"Okay, I think we need to try to remove and reset the sensor diode assembly. If you look at the bottom front of the sensor panel, you'll see a release button. Press it down and pull it up firmly on the sensor assembly." So I push the button down, give the flat sensor panel a firm tug, and sure enough, it pops right out and lifts away from the machine, dripping clear fluid out of the bottom of the newly released panel,
and dribbling it all over the floor and my shoes. "It appears to be leaking some clear fluid," I remark. To which the Palomar rep calmly retorts, "That's just a natural byproduct of the machine, nothing to worry about." At which point I reply with growing alarm, "By definition, machines do not have natural byproducts. Please tell me what the human fat melting laser machine is leaking onto my shoes." I'm pretty sure that it wasn't actually human fat, as no one had, as of yet, ever used this particular machine. But I really wanted a straight answer, so I was being a tad hyperbolic at this point.
"Distilled water and alcohol. Now please plug the diode assembly back into the machine and restart it," he replied.
I did as instructed, and once again attempted to activate a surgical tip, but still nothing happened.
"Yeah, looks like you probably have a bad diode assembly. We'll ship you out another one right away," the rep says.
"How long will that take?" I quietly ask, realizing the full magnitude of the situation.
3 business days, he says.
"Thank you," I tell him and hang up the phone. I motion for the doctor to join me in the hallway, and she reluctantly does so. Waiting worriedly in the hall for a status update is the CEO and head of operations.
"You get it working?"
asks the CEO. "I'm afraid not. There's a bad part that will need to be replaced. The new part should arrive in about 3 days. The doctor grows a little pale and says,
"But I have a patient on the table right now. She's already been prepped."
"Yes, I know, but there's nothing I can do for you until that part arrives." Everyone looks a little sick at this point, and the doctor groans,
"I really don't want to tell her we have to cancel the surgery."
I nodded sympathetically and said, "The thing I can't understand is how the diode could have gone out in the 3 days since you tested it. I mean, no one has used it. It probably wasn't even plugged in. You did activate a tip after the firmware update like I told you to, right?" The doctor looks at the CEO and operations chief and says,
"We didn't want to waste one. They're like $250 each."
"Huh," I say and ask in return, "And how much would you guys be willing to pay right now to not be in this situation?" Then I started backing slowly out of their executive huddle and say, "Sorry I can't do more for you, but unless someone has something computer-related they need from me, I'm going to go because this is really uncomfortable and I'm no longer useful to this process. Good luck," and fled back to my office. Ultimately, they had to take the patient to recovery and then send her home unliposucked. Luckily for the company, she was a volunteer from an employee's family, not a paying customer. They had offered her the procedure for free because nobody wants to pay good money for the privilege of being a doctor's first solo liposuction. She eventually did return after the part arrived and got her free liposuction. I was mercifully not involved that time. The doctor didn't last another year with the company, and she was the only one they'd paid to have trained for liposuction. The machine ended up collecting dust in a closet. I ended up sticking around for another 5 years before finally moving on to saner pastures. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Terrific Tales of Technology, number 6. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. What day is it, by the way? What day is it? This is Monday, okay. I'm just having, well, work's over now, so I'll actually soon be able to relax and, just play video games and stuff. It's one of those days where you literally just don't want to do anything else but relax. And that's what I intend to do when things are done. Not to say I didn't have fun recording, especially the last story. Oh dear. But yes, Relaxy Freezer it will be. Okay. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.